Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I've been going to town on the 1972 Mitchell Motorhome four-wheel drive conversion, and if you can see, I've made a lot of progress on it. I need to catch you guys up, so let's go dig into it. Hey guys, thanks for coming back. We got the 1972 Mitchell Motorhome here. We're doing a four-wheel drive conversion on it, and I've gone to town on this thing, like I said in the intro, and I didn't really film a lot for you guys. I'm sorry about that, but I can catch you guys up now. The main thing I've done here that you guys haven't seen is cleaning the frame up and getting all the two-wheel drive crossmembers off and the bracketry and stuff associated with that we don't need for this kit. And I've started mocking up the Kinser parts here on the frame, just kind of see how they go together. I'll show you guys that here in a little bit. But right here's the two-wheel drive stuff. I cut out the big cross member under the engine is the main thing. It was kind of a pain because it has all this structure on here and it's welded in multiple spots. It's not as easy to get to because it's kind of boxed in and under the truck and stuff. So I just kind of cut it out as best I could and then cleaned it up where it's welded on the frame afterwards. The coil buckets are pretty easy. It's just some rivets and some bolts on the bottom, and you can kind of hammer those out. And same thing with all the brackets. Like this would be the I-beam brackets. This is a cross member. This actually just unbolts. And then the frame brackets for the radius arms, those are riveted on. Basically what I do there is I cut the rivets with a torch. You can see there I kind of got on the bucket a little bit. I cut the heads off with the torch and then punch them out. Or sometimes I just pop the bracket off and then punch the rivets out after I get the bracket off. But this stuff is all out. You know, like I said, it's kind of a pain. This is kind of the probably the hardest part of this four-wheel drive conversion, and it's more time consuming and just a lot of labor involved in all this. It's kind of a pain to deal with, but short of that, everything's on the frames all cleaned up, and I kind of have the brackets installed. So these are the inner frame pieces, or whatever you want to call it, inserts. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of the whole four-wheel drive kit from Kinser, because this is kind of what everything bolts onto. You can see here is where the front cross member is going to bolt onto, and here I have the motor mounts installed, and the buckets and the shock mounts here. Everything's just kind of loosely installed here with the temporary bolts they provide. So I have these things fit in here. And we have it kind of temporarily bolted in, and I have to weld it in. So this is one of the pieces that has to be welded. This and the radius arm mounts have to be welded. Everything else is pretty much bolt on. But over here, I have some stuff we're doing before we can mount everything and weld everything on the chassis. I had to drill these holes here for the steering gear. And what they do here is pretty trick, or I guess it's just well engineered. There's actually spacers on these bolts. It's holding this inner piece about a ½ inch out. And that allows me to come in here with this hole. It's a perfect ½ inch size with a ½ inch drill bit, and punch through and drill the frame. And then I'm going to come back with a 3/4 drill bit and drill these out larger. And the bushings that are welded in this thing are going to stick through the frame that the steering gear is going to mount to, and I'll weld the outside of it. So the steering gear is going to have a nice flat area to bolt to. And it helps hold this thing in place, so it's actually going to go in a ½ inch. I hope I described that. It's kind of it's really neat because you're spacing it out and you're using these holes in this as a template, so it's perfect every time. So I guess that's what they're after, is making it harder for people to screw up that steering gear mount. But once I get a 3/4 inch drill bit, I'm going to drill out these holes so that thing will come through. I'll show you guys that whenever I get to that point, and it'll probably help explain it a little bit better. But then we just have to do a lot of measuring, make sure these things are correct, and then we're going to burn them in. And I think I'm going to try to get the engine in place and make sure we're clear of everything here. We're not running any major hurdles. And I'm also going to hang the inner fenders back on once the engine's in place, so I can verify we don't have to cut, trim, any of that kind of stuff. Because I'm kind of worried about right here where this engine mount is. I might have to trim the inner fender a little bit. And once I get all that done, I'm going to send that to paint, get blasted and painted along with the stuff that unbolts. So the buckets and the coilover mounts, or the engine mounts. And I'll get that stuff painted so it'll be nice and painted. And then we'll coat the frame just so it's nice and clean. And then hopefully by that point, the front axle will be here and we can start assembly. But I'm going to get after the drilling the holes, and we'll get those cross members burned in, so we'll catch up with that. All right, guys, well, I have everything pretty much ready to go together. I did put some, throw ahead and throw some paint on the inside of these boxes that go on the inner frame rails, as well as the inside of the frame where they are. You know, this is probably like a real overkill step. This is never going to rust out in 100 years, but makes me feel better anyway. So I have everything painted and then cleaned off where it's going to weld. Up in here, and also have the holes drilled right there, those 3/4 holes. You can see the bushings are starting to want to come through there. Might take a little bit of force to get that in there. I'll get some C-clamps and kind of clamp everything together. But that one's in. This is the driver's side, passenger side rather. It goes in a lot easier. It doesn't have those steering gear bolts to deal with. We'll get some bolts and put it in here to get this thing kind of in place, and then they have you clamp this all down before you burn it in. So I'm going to get all that sorted out, and we'll catch back up with you guys when I'm ready to weld. All right, I have everything ready to go. Have all the pieces clamped together, and I have the temporary bolts put in here to help suck this stuff up. They provide these with the kit. Just helps you keep everything nice and flush and how it's supposed to be. And make sure you're completely compressed all in here, because the measurement between here is important. You can see here the bosses are sticking through the frame for the steering gear. If you can tell, the frame here isn't exactly flat, so you couldn't just bolt your steering gear to this. It wouldn't mount flush. These stick out past the frame. They have you drill a bigger hole there, and they stick through. I thought that was a really clever design to give you a nice flat surface to mount your steering gear to. And it's going to be really solid because I'll weld around this. And all this will be welded in, so you have a nice strong spot for your steering gear to be mounted to, which is important. Same deal over here. I have it ready to weld. I'm going to weld this one first. That's why I have the extra clamps on this. That's just to kind of squeeze the frame rail together to make it nice and flush whenever you weld it. But here you can see the instructions they have. These are really nice detailed instructions. The amount of work that goes into instructions like this is pretty extensive, and it you know, it takes a lot of work, but it's really appreciated on the end, because you can always reference these to know you're doing everything correctly and you're not wondering. They are probably a little bit more detailed than someone like I need, because I've done a lot of this before, like removing the buckets and stuff. But if you're really intimidated by something like this, the really detailed instructions really help your confidence level to make that first cut and really dig into the project. So really appreciate those instructions. Right here they give you the tolerance for the frame, the width. So I thought we'd check it here. I've already done this, but we are pretty much right on the money. 28 1/8 is what we're looking for. And if you can see there, we are pretty much right on the money and well within the tolerance they give you there. So since everything's ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and burn this one in and see how it goes, and then we'll move over to this one. All right, guys, well, you saw me just tack this stuff up, and glad I looked at the instructions and kind of read through them, because that's always a good idea. And it says, after tack welding, it is recommended to temporarily install drivetrain and engine perches to verify fitment of frame boxes. Once fitment is verified, both frame boxes can be fully welded. So glad I didn't just go to town and weld these things up. I'm sure everything's fine. I probably wouldn't have to do this step, but I'm going to follow the instructions and get the engine mounts installed on the frame here and get the engine placed in here. And then we can just verify fitment, and we can also verify fitment with our inner fenders and clearance there. So I guess it's kind of a good thing, but it's also a problem because our engine is an OBS engine, like a 97 and older engine, and they designed this kit with Super Duty engine mounts, which is 99 and up. So we have to get some Super Duty engine mounts and swap those over on that 7.3 before I can get it placed in here. And so we're kind of waiting on those. Apparently they'll be here next week. We'll see how that turns out. Once that happens, we'll get the thing fully welded in. It's taken everything I have not to just burn this thing in, because you work everything to this point, get everything cleaned up, and I can't just fully weld everything. But that's just the way it goes. I'm going to slow down and make sure I do everything by the book. And they also want you to install this front cross member. And then once you install that, you can take your frame braces out. But the problem is I can't get it in there with the frame braces in. I should have tried that before I did everything. I could have slipped it in here and then installed the buckets. You know, once they're out, you can put it in there, but then your frame might move. So I'm gonna have to figure out if I can find a way to get this cross member in here without causing too much problem. But we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, while I'm waiting on the engine mounts to get that engine placed in here, I'm gonna work on the radius arm mount under the frame. And it's going to be kind of the trickier part of all this right there. This guy welding it on the frame, and I have to measure from one of the holes up here all the way back to that frame 41.5 inches. And it's not flat, it's not on the same plane, it's not on the same level. So it's going to be kind of fun doing that and making sure I get the alignment just perfect. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to do that. And then we can get that radius arm mount welded in place. I think that can go into place no matter what we're doing up here. So I might work on that until we get the engine mount. So I'm going to get after it. So what I came up with here was I have a square on the frame going through the center of that hole. And I squared the level off of the frame and not the ground, since the ground is, or the frame is not level with the ground, rather. So here you can see I have my level here. It's zeroed out. I zeroed it out on top of the frame rail here where it's flat. So this is square with the frame, going right through the center of that hole. And I also have the frame all cleaned up down here where the radius arm mount goes. You can see it there on the frame. And it goes up under here, if you can see that, up under that. But it basically just sits up on the frame there. So nice and flush. So basically all you have to do is measure from that, from the square to here. And let me get the tape measure set up and I'll show you guys. All right, since I have my square hanging off the frame, I can keep the tape measure level and get a correct reading. And down here at the bolt hole, we are 43.5. But since my square is 2 inches thick exactly, you know, their measurement was 41.5, so add 2 inches, 43.5. So right there, I think is where it's going to go. So I'm going to get in here and weld this thing up and do the same thing on the other side, and our radius arm mounts will be mounted. Okay, here we go. I got the radius arms mounted and welded in. I really hate welding upside down on a creeper, but I think we got them welding in good enough. They're not going to come off of there. Hopefully they're in the right spot. It's kind of one of those measure a bunch of times, and when your measurements are all coming out the same, it's time to weld it in. But yeah, I measured it the way they had it, and I measured it different ways of other stuff just to make sure, verify everything's the same. And I think we're good, hopefully. And I can also look through, you can kind of see it there if I can get it lined up on the camera. You can look through the hole there and look straight through the other side, so you know that the holes are lined up for the radius arm mounts. But, you know, this isn't a precise measurement because there is adjustability on the arms, but still, you still want it to be, you know, relatively perfect. And here's the back side of it. I'm not sure what we're doing for transmission crossmember. There are these bosses on the back of the mounts there. So I don't know if there's a transmission crossmember that they're going to send in to mount up or not. I guess we haven't talked about that, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So I guess the next step is going to be waiting on those engine mounts so I can get the 7.3 Powerstroke set in the frame here and verify that our internal frame boxes are, everything's correct there, and the engine mounts are going to work, since this is the first setup they did. Once I verify that's right, I'll burn these boxes in so they're going to be permanent, and then we'll see if, well, while the engine's sitting in there, I'm going to see if the inner fenders will make sure they will clear everything. We don't have to trim anything on those. Once I verify that, the inner fenders and the pieces like the motor mounts, the buckets, and front cross member are all going to go get painted. And while that's happening, we'll see if I can do something with the front of this frame and paint it and get all this stuff cleaned up and painted as well. So now we're just at a waiting game, waiting on those engine mounts. Once that gets in, we'll catch back up with you guys and see if we can get the 7.3 Powerstroke in here. All right, guys, well, I have the motor mounts there from Complete Performance in the box over there. So we're ready to get this 7.3 mocked up in the frame there, at least just to make sure that our brackets are going to work for our motor mounts here. I have them just mocked up in the frame there, bolted into place. We don't have our coil buckets installed here, but that should be good enough to get these motor mounts installed in the engine and get the engine placed in the frame and make sure we're clearing the firewall like we should, and that our locations for the mounts are in the right spot, because if we do have to change something, Kinser's going to go ahead and remake the mounts for us in any direction we need to move the engine if it's not going to fit. But hopefully, since we have those 3D scans that we originally did to place the engine in the engine bay on a computer, hopefully everything fits. So I have the engine here, just kind of want to go over it here. It is kind of grimy and greasy. It is straight out of the truck. It is a 97 like OBS engine, not a Super Duty engine. We're going to clean all this up, and we're going to replace all the wear items on this stuff, like the pulleys and the compressor and alternator, all that kind of stuff. We're going to do a vacuum delete because we don't need that, because we have our fancy Hydro Boost setup over there. But yeah, the turbo is going to change. We're going to put a T4 style turbo on this. One, for performance aspects. We're also going to change the injectors so we have more fuel to feed that turbo. But the T4 turbo is going to be angled more square with the engine block, and that's going to give us a lot better downpipe angle, because this goes right into the firewall when we did the 3D scan. So the factory turbo is not going to work, I don't think, with this setup, at least without a significantly modified downpipe. I guess if you turned it like this and then went down, we could probably make it work. But the T4 turbo, you know, already is sitting up like this, so it's sticking out this way, and we might even be able to get the factory downpipe with that T4 kit to work with this setup. Well, so we'll see how that works once that gets in. All right, so I guess we can open up our motor mounts here and see what we got here. I got these in the other day. All right, there we go. There's one of them. Hopefully this fits. That fits there. That is transmission mount. We don't need that yet. All right, here's our other one. I'm guessing these don't have a left and a right. Maybe they do. Yeah, they are a little bit different. I'll have to figure out which one goes on which side. But yeah, they fit the holes, so that is a good start. We'll have to see if we can get these things mounted up here on the engine. Looks like they bolt to since this is an OBS engine, it is slightly different. It looks like we're missing the bracket that it bolts to here, unless it's the same, because those only have one bolt hole and these have two here. Yep, I'm not sure if that's different. I'm gonna do some research and see if we got to get those blocks that bolt to the engine. I'm not a big 7.3 guy. I know more about the 6-liter Powerstrokes and the 6.7s. I haven't really done much with these 7.3s, so I'm gonna have to do some more research and see what we got to do to convert these motor mounts so we can get this thing thrown in the engine bay. All right, I did some research, and those Super Duty mounts will not bolt up to our OBS engine without the correct blocks for the Super Duty, and that's what these are here. I went ahead and ordered some once I realized they are different, and you can see here on these we have 2 bolt holes to match up with our motor mounts that are on the Super Duty mounts. I gotta keep all this straight so I don't confuse everybody. So we're gonna yank these off and put these new blocks on with our new motor mounts, and I'm also gonna yank off the turbo kit because we're not using that on this engine. We're gonna get a T4 setup, like I said earlier in the video, I think. So I'm gonna work on yanking the stuff off we don't need so it's out of the way when we put this in there, and we'll start stab this thing in here. All right, here we go. I got the engine installed. After I pulled everything off we didn't need, I went ahead and threw this thing in, used the forklift there, so it was pretty easy to get this thing stabbed in here. You know, this is pretty heavy engine. I considered using the cherry picker just to have more control, but my cherry picker, like a lot of others, it has a mind of its own and it's hard to get around and move around and stuff, so I like to just use the forklift. Big heavy machinery is always the answer. So got the engine in here, and I'm really happy with the firewall clearance. We have a lot of room here. We have to get up pipes up through here, but we have room. We didn't have that problem on my Ultimate crew cab back there because the exhaust manifolds on it are on top of the head and the intake is on the bottom. It's kind of reversed from a standard engine, so it doesn't have up pipes. But we did have to fit a down pipe, but I think we have plenty of room for a down pipe over here. And like I said, we're going to be doing a T4 style turbo, and it's going to be mounted perpendicular to the engine here. So the exhaust will be pointing straight out, and it'll come out here and hopefully go down right here in this hole here. So we have lots of room for a down pipe. Same thing, up pipe will be really easy on this side. The only thing I am kind of worried about as far as clearance goes is right here, this corner of the pinch weld. You can see the bell housing. I don't know if you can't really see it. Let's get it right here. The bell housing is going to go along here, and it might run into this pinch weld right here. But on the on my ultimate crew cab back there, I did have to cut some of that pinch weld to clear the downpipe. So I could do that here on the bell housing, although I'd rather not to on this really nice, clean, original truck. So hopefully we can snake by there and get that thing in there. It's going to be really difficult with that transmission because it's a manual. We have to slide it in, you know, straight to get the input shaft in the clutch. And this is going to be kind of a in and up and an in. So either way, it's going to be pretty difficult. You know, we can have some tilt with the engine and get the engine pointed down maybe. Might be what we have to do. But overall, it's going to be pretty tight right there in that one corner. So as good as it looks, we do have some clearancing issues right there. But we'll address that when we start dealing with the engine. I did unfortunately have some problems with the motor mounts here. Now I was pre-warned from Kinser that if we did have problems, they can get another set knocked out. This is why I'm installing this engine at this point, to verify everything's right. And we had some problems with our driver's side engine pedestal here that bolts to the chassis. Now I haven't done a lot of digging on what went wrong, but what we ran into was the pedestal was tilted forward too much, you know, like this. So what I ended up doing to get it to sit in there is I had to stack some washers behind this to kind of cockeye it this way. Or basically our mounts weren't lining up there for the holes on the motor mount there. So I have to, I'm gonna pull the engine out and I have to do a bunch of measuring and figure out why it didn't line up. Is it the frame rails? Is it the boxes I welded in there, or is it the perches themselves? Hopefully it's the engine perches themselves, because that's the easiest solution. We'll just figure out how they need to change, and Kinser will knock some out and send them my way. If it's something with the frame rails or the boxes are wrong or something of that nature, I'm gonna be doing a lot of cutting and welding and trying to fix that. So either way, it's a problem we have to address, but the engine is set in there now. I'm not gonna leave the washers like that. I'm gonna try to do a better job than that. But it looks like that's all we're gonna have to do to make this work, is to change that one pedestal over here. This one seemed to go together really well. So I don't think this one's a problem. Now, one thing we could do to alleviate that corner of the firewall there is move the engine over. From the factory, these engines are offset to the passenger side, I think just to give more room to the driver and the footwell there. But I crawled underneath the truck, and the crankshaft is pretty much lined up with the hole in the transmission cover under the floor, on the floor there. So you basically have to abide by that, because that's where your gear stick's going to stick up through the floor, because this is going to have a manual ZF5 in it. You know, we could modify that some, but then your stick's getting further away from the driver. So I'd like to stay with all the aesthetics and the not aesthetics, ergonomics of the factory bump side, so everything's, you know, as it should be, designed by Ford. But we also run into the problem of it's already designed to be offset to the passenger side, so we're running out of room here on the passenger side, so we can't really go over very much more. You can see our stud for our mount right there is already, you couldn't get a nut on there, so you'd have to get the nut before you set the engine all the way down. So either way, these are things that are going through my mind as I'm doing this, to things we need to do, things we need to check, and all that kind of stuff. But the big thing is we need to verify that everything on the frame rails is within spec and where it should be. And then I need to figure out a way to get the measurements of that engine perch there and how it needs to change the Kinser so they can get another set knocked out for us ASAP. So I'm going to yank this engine back out. I'm going to do a bunch of measuring and figure that out, and I'll probably fill you guys in with what I find out. All right, so I think I have everything figured out. I got Kinser lined out and everything we need to change that motor mount. I've had this engine in and out about 10 times now, but it is to make sure that everything's right with the motor mount, and we're not, basically the main concern was we wanted to make sure there was nothing wrong on my end that would be causing issues, so they don't go ahead and change the mounts on their end and then send it off to another customer and it be wrong, or they build another truck and it be wrong because there's something wrong on my end. So what we did was we verified everything. We did a bunch of checks to make sure everything's mine. We measured everything. We checked the angle of the engine to make sure it was perfect for what they designed it for and all of that stuff. And basically what we came down to was we think the motor mounts on their engine that they scanned for the 3D scanner on this, they think it had old, worn out, busted out motor mounts, and this driver's side one must have been in the wrong position when they scanned it. because basically it was tilted this way and it was tilted kind of like this. So we're going to try a new motor mount. Hopefully they designed one, and I took a bunch of pictures and measurements and sent it to them. So we're going to give it another try, a version 2. Remember, this is like prototyping stuff. This isn't final, final done, ready to go to a customer kind of stuff. This is the first set that they've built. So there's always going to be this kind of fitment, revisions and all that kind of stuff with this. So it was totally to be expected with this project. This isn't like an out of the blue, stuff isn't fitting kind of a deal. We expected that because this is the first go of it. So we're getting a version 2 on the driver's side motor mount, and we're going to verify that that's right and get it in here. But if you notice, I have the transmission in. That was another thing we wanted to check before I had them go ahead, give them the green light to go ahead and fab in that new mount, was we wanted to verify placement of the engine just 100%, because if we had to move the engine left or right or up and down or anything like that, we want to do that now while they're revisiting that motor mount on that side, because that would dictate the position of the engine. So if we had to move it to the left or right, we want to do it now. But basically what we came down to was, I think this is where it's going to live. So I went ahead and put the transmission in. I was talking about worrying about stabbing the transmission in and having clearance. What I ended up doing, and I'll probably do this on final assembly just to make things easier on myself, is put everything together outside of the engine or outside of the chassis as an assembly and put it in all as one unit. And that's what I did here. Now we're missing the flywheel and clutch and all that stuff, so there's going to be more weight on the back, but the thing hung really well just off the engine. I was worried it was going to be, lawn darting down to the floor with that transmission hanging off the back, but it hung really well, and I was able to get it put into the chassis there without any much problem. But we do have my concern there with this pinch weld right here. We are really close right here. I can barely even fit my finger in between here. So fitment, we have enough clearance right now to run it, but if you ever had to take the transmission out, if you can see, it's kind of hard to tell on camera, like just enough clearance for my hand to fit there, and even then it's rubbing and I have to kind of shove it in between there. So we don't have a ton of clearance to be able to pull the transmission out. If your clutch went out, or if you just had to pull the transmission for some reason or something like that. Unfortunately, it looks like the engine is going to have to come out if you need to service the clutch. But it's one of those things. Hopefully that never happens, because we're going with all new stuff on this thing. Hopefully that's never a problem and it never has to come back out, but just something to think about for serviceability. It's going to be kind of a problem there. But like I said, we're just going to leave it as is. In the cab here, we were talking about the shifter hole, and it ended up being pretty much right in line, if you can tell there, but it is a little bit further back. So it's about like right here. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is we'll just use an automatic transmission cover, and I'll cut a new hole just so it's perfect over the transmission there for the gear stick, and we'll use the boot for the ZF5 there with the stick. And that way we're not trying to patch holes and move the hole on that standard cover. I'll just get an automatic cover and we'll move that hole. But it is in line. And I have the transmission in, like I said. And I have it set up here. I had the tape measure there for doing measurements for the cross member. And Kinser does have a transmission cross member that goes between their radius arm mounts there. I kind of think it's going to be in the way of our transfer case, because this engine or this transmission is shorter than probably what they're used to dealing with, which would be like modern automatics and that kind of stuff, like a 6R80 or something. So we're pretty far forward, so our mount has to go here, and we're like 10 to 11 inches from that, and we have to hang our transfer case here. So it's going to be pretty much right in the way of the transfer case, going by the pictures they sent me. So what I'm going to do, it looks like we're almost in line with the factory bump side transmission cross member there. I'm going to throw it in here and just see what we have to deal with there. If it's something I think we can make work, that might be the easiest solution. So I have it here. Let me set the camera up and we'll see if it fits. See if we get lucky. All right, I think I got it there where you guys can see it. All right, well, looks like we're not going to have enough room for the factory location. because it's up here. It's got these brackets that it sits up on, but we do have the option of going down to the frame, and it's going to be kind of low, but we might have room to make that work. We're probably going to run into problems with the drive shaft though. Just looking at this right here, I'm just kind of, visualizing the transfer case hanging right here, and it looks like our front yoke is going to go right into this cross member here. So I don't think that's going to work either. We might just be doing a fab deal on this. I guess we might see if the Kinser one will work, but like I said, it's pretty much going to be right in the way too, because they have one that goes forward and one that goes back, and the one that goes forward I think is going to be right in the way of our transfer case right here. So either way, I think we're going to be in for it on the transmission cross member, but that is what it is. If that's the only thing I really have to fabricate on this whole deal, I guess that's not too bad. So I might get the transfer case in here and just make sure we're going to clear the floor there, because if we hit the floor right here, we're going to have to lower the transmission down, and that's going to change our angle of the engine and the angle of our output. So that's going to affect things down the road. So I'll be needing to know that now. So I might go snag that transfer case and throw it in here and see how that works. Okay, I obviously didn't get the transfer case shoved in there. It's going to be a little tricky to get it in just because of the way that transfer case is, and sitting on my jack, I wasn't able to stabilize it enough to get it up in there. So I'm either going to have to make something or see if I can come up with something to hold that transfer case in, or I might yank everything out again and then put the transfer case on and see if I can put it back in there. That might be the easiest way, as long as everything with the extra weight of the transfer case doesn't screw up getting the engine and stuff in there. But for now, I'm going to worry about that later, because I have our new motor mount bracket, I guess that's what you call that, perch. I've been kind of calling it a perch, in from Kinser Chassis. They knocked this thing out really quick. They did the modifications that I requested to make everything work over here. So this is the old one. I also have the steering gear set up here just for clearance issues and stuff. I'm going to mock up the inner fenders up here like I've already said. But right now we just need to get this new motor mount perch installed and make sure all of that is correct. But I think we're just going to pick up on the engine and then drop that thing out from the bottom, and then you put the new one in there and make sure everything fits that way, because then we won't have to mess with yanking the engine and stuff out, and we can verify this fitment is on par like right away. But up under here, I wanted to show you guys what I ended up doing on the cross member. Now I don't think it's definitely not going to stay like this, but this is just here to hold everything. The factory bump side transmission mount is the same bolt pattern on the transmission side, so I bolted it up to our ZF5, and then obviously that goes into our cross member here. But it is a little bit lower than the factory setup would be, so right now it's just hanging off some bolts on the factory mount. So I might either build some spacers to do something there, or I might move the brackets down or make new brackets, something of that nature. And that is all if the front output of the transfer case doesn't hit it right here. I'm kind of concerned about that, but if we can get the transfer case in here and verify that it clears for the front differential, I'll just keep this cross member here and make things easy on me. But otherwise, we might be either cutting it here and modifying it, or just making a new one. That might be easier. But I think I also have to make a cross member from here to here. Kinser said they like to have that on there to help strengthen the frame here where these radius arm mounts are on. They, like I said, they have transmission mounts that bolt to these, but since we're so far away from that, we're just going to continue with this, and then I'll just make a bar that goes across here to tie those together to strengthen the frame. But yeah, we're well on our way to have this 7.3 installed, and hopefully that motor mount works just perfect, and we'll be able to move on. Alright guys, I knocked out the new motor mount there, and everything is just absolutely perfect. Couldn't be happier with how this new one turned out. What I ended up doing was just dropping the old one out and put this one in here, and it went right together. I did have them on their drawings, have them move the holes a little bit further back, because we are rubbing pretty hard on the studs on that motor mount, but I'll just open those up on this one. That'll be good enough for this, and call it good there on the motor mount. So This engine is in place and where it's going to live, and I'm happy with everything. So next up, I'm going to pull the engine and transmission back out, finish welding all of those frame pieces. But while I had the engine in here with the steering gear, I'm working on the inner fender here on the passenger side or driver's side, and I had to cut out quite a bit here for the steering gear. You can see this, I had to cut out this right here and then up here down to this spot right here. That's just to give us a little clearance for the steering gear there. That's not a big deal. It was easy to do. And we had a little rust spot right here I fixed because this thing, the house battery for the camper was sitting here and it leaked acid and got a little hole there in that, but I got that cut out. Pretty close to getting everything ready for paint, and we decided to actually go a water, air-to-air intercooler instead of a water-to-air. We found that we can fit a small one up here on front of the core support in between, or on the outside, and sandwich the AC condenser between that and the radiator. So hopefully we'll have enough room to do that. So that is coming. So I want to get that air-to-air intercooler mounted before we send that core support to paint. So I'll be waiting on that. But once that gets here, that shouldn't take too long. And then we'll be 100% ready to take all these pieces to paint, the loose pieces, and I'll be able to paint the frame. But before we do that, I have to yank this engine out of here, finish welding our frame boxes, and I have to weld in our track bar mount on that driver's side frame rail as well. So I'm going to get after that. This episode's already too long. I talk too much and make the episodes too long, so I'm going to try to do better in the future videos to try to condense how much I'm talking and explain things easier and have a little bit more action in the videos. As I was editing this video, I realized that I just spent the whole time talking and not a whole bunch showing you guys what I'm doing here. So hopefully the future videos, I'm going to work better to get the camera out when I'm actually working and not just pick it up at the end and give you guys an update all along the way. I'll still have to do that sometimes, but anyway, just a lot of talking on this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to cut this one off here so it's not too long, and we'll the next time, hopefully, we'll be putting the front axle under this thing and get to see this thing with the four-wheel drive front axle for the first time. That's going to be awesome. If you want to see that, subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you like this motorhome project. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.